In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how I built a bearded dragon enclosure that can be used for both inside and outside. This is Amelia, and I'm Justin, and you're watching the Reptile and Conservation Garage. Now, the first thing that I want to mention is that this type of enclosure here that I've made for my bearded dragon is not going to work for all bearded dragons. For example, some of my other bearded dragons I've had in the past would definitely jump out of this because this is an open top enclosure. Amelia, on the other hand, Amelia's taking a dump. When it comes to outdoor reptile enclosures, now today I'm just going to be discussing bearded dragon enclosures and Amelia's enclosure specifically. So one of the number one things we want to be looking at is the color of the enclosure. And we also want to be looking at how we have things set up in the enclosure and also the color of any of the objects that are also in the enclosure, because we want to make sure that this enclosure is safe for her, and we don't want something in here that's going to get ridiculously hot and she ends up getting burnt, because you have to remember the sun, unlike your lights that you have in your enclosure hooked up to a thermostat, the sun doesn't have a thermostat. So therefore, the way that we have to design these enclosures for a bearded dragon, you have to really have things planned out in advance. You have to understand what's going to work and what's not going to work. Now this here used to be Amelia's indoor hide. This was one of her hides that she had in her indoor enclosure. Now, in an indoor enclosure, these types of hides are going to be fine. Now, outside, this type of hide or any type of artificial rocks or branches that you may buy at a pet store, these are things you definitely do not want to be using in an outdoor enclosure. And the reason why is because the longer the sun lays on these, the hotter they get. And there is a potential there that reptile could accidentally get burnt if it decides to climb up on top of one of these hides or fake tree branches or rocks or whatever else you put in here. So also the other thing too is that inside of this is going to get extremely hot, so she's not going to use it anyway, because it's probably going to be about 4 or 5 times hotter inside of here than it is in the actual outside air temperature. So now we're going to go over some of the things that I use in this enclosure. So the first thing I did with this enclosure was I painted it white. And the reason why I painted this white is because white is going to deflect heat better than any other color. Now, I could have left this a natural wood color, which would have had also been fine as well. But when I made this enclosure, all the wood that's here is all pieces left over from enclosures from previous builds that I did a few years ago, and you can see that there's some OSB here, and OSB, even when painted, it looks pretty crappy, but putting some paint onto it does help a little bit better than just leaving it plain old OSB. Now, painting this enclosure white is really good, especially when you have really hot days. Like, for example, today and this weekend is going to be incredibly hot. We're looking at temperatures of 33 with a humid index that may push up to 37 degrees Celsius. So when painting, if you decide to paint one of these enclosures, you don't want to be using dark colors, because if you do, even though this is an open top enclosure, if you have a dark color, something like black, for example, all that heat is going to absorb into that dark color. And even though the space is all open, it's still going to get a lot hotter here than it is up here. So basically all you want is for her to be exposed to the natural sunlight, but you don't want the actual enclosure to absorb more heat than what's actually needed. The substrate in this enclosure is play sand, and some of it that I added in here is from her indoor enclosure. So there is a little bit of topsoil in here, not a whole lot, but she still needs at least another 3 bags of play sand. In total, it takes about 10 bags of play sand to fill this 8x4 space. So you may be asking yourself, doesn't the play sand get really hot? So something like, say, when you're at the beach and it's on a hot day and you walk on that dry sand and you burn the bottoms of your feet. Well, no, actually play sand and beach sand are two completely different things. And just to be clear, you cannot use beach sand in your bearded dragon enclosure. This is just kind of a comparison when we're looking at, the sun laying on it all day. Now, the play sand can get pretty warm, but it doesn't get dangerously hot because it's a highly refined sand. So it doesn't have all of the things, all of the components, I should say, that's in, say, beach sand, or say even construction sand. Construction sand can even get pretty hot too. So this here is a temperature gun, and this is one of the most handiest tools that you will use as a reptile keeper, because especially with outdoor enclosure, because I can go around and check the temperature throughout the day. I can check the substrate temperature, all of her wood, rocks, basking areas, even the shady areas, just to see, where her temperatures are. So she's been out here now for probably about 2.5 hours. And we're going to go and see what the temperature is on her sand that's in the sun. This part here is shady, but over there, it's in the direct sunlight and has been there for a couple hours. So we're just going to check it, and then we'll get back to you. So right now we're at about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's pretty good for a temperature, and it will get a little bit warmer. The hottest I've seen it get is about 110 to 11. But other than that, the substrate has been holding up pretty well as far as not getting too hot. Now, on a day like today and what we're going to be experiencing this weekend, Amelia isn't going to be completely outside like she is now. I'm actually going to wheel her inside, so that way half of her enclosure is shaded by the garage and the other half is in the sun. This way it'll allow her to choose whether she wants to be in the hotter section of the enclosure or if she wants to be up here in the cooler section. But where it is going to be dangerously hot, I do want to make sure that she has that option. On most days, she usually just hides under her driftwood. One of the things I didn't get to yet was what type of hide do I actually use in this enclosure. I don't have the hide right now set up because I'm kind of undecided what I want to do, if I want to go with slate or if I actually just want to use, the patio stones to create a hide. When I get that done, I'll definitely do a quick update in an upcoming video on that. So as far as wood goes, you can pretty much use any type of wood as long as it's a hardwood of some sort. Or, my favorite is driftwood. Now this piece of driftwood here, this is a very large piece of driftwood, and I found this a couple years ago, and Amelia just loves it. She climbs up onto it and hangs out here in around the grass, or she digs holes underneath and likes to lay there most of the day when it gets too hot. The other piece of wood that I have over here this is actually a tree root. And even though this is from a spruce tree, so this is a softwood tree, but whereas a root, it's actually more of a hardwood than it is a softwood. And this has been dried out for years. I've had this for a very long time, so it is a very safe piece of wood to use in here for her enclosure. And one of the things I like about this is the darkest object I have here in the enclosure. And Amelia, a lot of times you'll see her up here on top of this tree early in the morning, because where this is a darker piece of wood, it's going to absorb heat a lot more quicker. So early in the mornings, Amelia will come up here to get a head start on her basking. Is rock, and this is one of her basking areas when she's inside, and her lights are hooked up here to the top. So this is where she'll bask when she's inside, but it's also good to have outside as well, because sometimes she does like to lay on this rock. And what you'll notice about this rock is, well, first of all, it's a piece of slate, but it's not a black slate. It's more of a grayish blue color. So this rock, just like everything else in here, it's going to absorb quite a bit of heat, but it's not going to get dangerously hot. And that is important. So when you're using rocks in enclosures, you don't want to be using anything that's really dark. So the other thing that I have in here is a water dish. This is very important, especially when keeping your bearded dragons outside. Even though they don't drink a whole lot, Amelia and pretty much all of my bearded dragons have always drank water. It wasn't very often, but occasionally they do drink it. And this water dish here is actually just a plant tray, and it's a large one. You can get, of course, all different sizes. And the other thing that's good about them too is that they're shallow. So it's easy for Amelia to get in and out of this dish with no problem. And sometimes she does make a mess in here because she likes to swim around and play in it and splash water. The other thing with outdoor water dishes is that these have to be changed out every day because they're sitting in the sun all day, and you want to make sure they're cleaned out and they have fresh water every morning. So what I do before I bring her in the evening, I'll empty the tray of water out. Then in the morning, I will clean it and then refill it with some fresh water. And I do this every day. That way she has a constant source of fresh water available to her. And the other thing that I have in here, as far as plants go, is I do have artificial grass. I've never used artificial grass in outdoor enclosures before. I like to use live, but because of the way I have Amelia's environment here set up and the play sand, it's really hard to keep the plants alive. But however, there is a way around that, and usually what I would have had done if it wasn't for putting in the artificial plants, and I don't know if I'm still going to do this or not, but I might, is keep my plants in a small pot. And of course, make sure that they're plants that like a lot of heat and dry conditions. And then that way, when I do water them, the water stays contained within the pot and the plant will do fine. The other thing I didn't mention is also I have a thermometer attached to the enclosure as well. This way I can get a reading on the air temperature and the humidity just to see what's going on in the outside environment. There's a lot more that I wanted to do with this video today, but the sun's actually starting to get closer in my direction, and I'm going to be actually moving Amelia here inside. However, I'm going to be doing more updates on this enclosure. Before I end this video too, the other thing a lot of people probably have a lot of questions about is, what happens in the winter time when I have her inside, and even though this is an open top enclosure, how do you keep the heat in? Well, first of all, I have a large wood furnace slash wood stove, and I can get the temperatures in this building just as hot as it is in the summertime. However, I don't do that because I have a lot of species that actually go in brumation during the winter, and Amelia is actually one of those. Amelia's actually her lighting. She may use in total maybe three months out of a year or a little more. It depends on when she decides that she's going to go in brumation. She usually goes into brumation around December to January, and she'll stay in brumation till about the end of April into the beginning of May. So she always has her UVB and her heat lights available, but the thing is, she never really uses them, and she spends she spends all of her time outside in the summer as long as the weather is fine. Days that's really, really rainy and miserable, then I'll keep her inside and just use her indoor lighting. Even on overcast days, I'll still put her out, and she seems to really like the overcast days the most, and I find that's when she's the most active, when she's outside, and she's running around everywheres and digging holes and just doing bearded dragon things. So when it comes to keeping the temperature in the garage during the winter, I usually keep it between 22 to 24 degrees during the winter months, uh, and then during the night when the fire dies down, it can cool down to about 19, sometimes 17 degrees Celsius. And in the morning when I come in, there's a nice bit of coals in the stove, so I just have to add more wood to it, and it's also hooked up to a thermostat as well, so I can set the temperature. I don't want it too hot for the animals that go into brumation, but also when it comes to the species that I have that require heat 24/7, like my boas, for example, they have heat in their enclosures throughout the entire year. Now, on a day like today, and what the forecast is looking like in this coming week, a lot of the lights that are in here, as far as heat goes, is completely shut off because it's just way too hot. And this garage, during the summer months, gets unbearably warm and super humid. The animals love it, but when I'm in here trying to work and do maintenance, water changes, and all the other things that I need to do, it's not so fun for me. But however, I will be doing more on this outdoor enclosure that Amelia has here. And there's also some other things I'm also going to be doing as far as upgrades. And I'm also going to be doing some external work on this enclosure as well to make it look a lot more nicer. However, this brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.